Well, Yemen remains divided mainly between two sides competing for control and influence. Let's take a look. Forces loyal to President Rabu Mansour Hadi control those areas marked in blue. They're backed by a Saudi-led coalition, and it began launching airstrikes against Houthi rebels 5 years ago to support the internationally recognized government. Now, the Houthis are backed by Iran and control the land here in red. Sorry, I meant to say brown earlier rather than blue. And it does include the capital, Sana'a, which they seized in September 2014. Now, last year, a separatist group backed by the UAE turned on Hadi's government and seized its interim capital, Aden. Then, after a deal was signed in Riyadh, Saudi forces took back control and the UAE withdrew its forces. Finally, this area that's marked here is dominated by the group Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Well, let's speak to Rami Khouri, who's a professor of journalism at the American University of Beirut and also a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. He joins us now on Skype from Beirut. Rami, always good to have you on Al Jazeera. Let's start with where the war is right now. The Houthis do appear to have strengthened their position in recent weeks. Are we any closer to any kind of a resolution?
I think we're probably getting close to the point where the Saudis are going to recognize that they're just losing more and more and creating more animosity towards them all around the world, and certainly in Yemen, and we'll probably figure out how to ratchet up the behind-the-scenes talks that have been going on now for some months, and to get into a serious discussion of how to end the war, and the Saudis can withdraw gracefully, or as gracefully as possible, after the catastrophe that they and the Emiratis have created. So I would guess that the continued fighting doesn't have much more to go, because nothing more can be achieved.
Well, Rami, obviously the only way that a conflict continues if there are the weapons to fight it. I see that various Western nations have been strengthening their arms embargoes on Yemen. Has that made a difference?
Not very much. No, the world is so open to black markets and informal markets, so you can get anything you want anywhere in the world, even if there's a boycott or sanctions on you or whatever. It's not just the availability of weapons, it's the willpower to keep fighting, which many in Yemen keep showing. And it's also the widespread international lack of concern. We've seen this in Syria now for almost 9 years. We're going to see it in Libya now as well, that these wars can go on, and hundreds of thousands of people can be killed, millions can be displaced, and the world doesn't particularly care. These are disposable nations in the eyes of the world, unfortunately. So there needs to be some measure of movement towards governance in Yemen that is acceptable to the majority of Yemenis, which the Yemenis had worked towards and achieved in the 1990s and early 2000s. But this is really the ultimate solution: better governance, addressing people's needs, and for external actors, particularly people like the Saudis and the Emiratis and others, and the Iranians to an extent, to stay out of this situation as much as possible.
Rami, you talk about this willpower to keep fighting, and I do want to ask you about Saudi Arabia. Given the scale of the coronavirus crisis that they're grappling with at home, could we see potentially less involvement in Yemen going forward from them?
I would anticipate that the Saudis, sometime in the coming 6 months or so, are going to realize that to continue what they're doing can only be bad news for them in terms of the cost, the animosity, the international political pressure on them. There's countries around the world. Germany just announced they're going to continue their arms sales embargo, and others in Europe have done that. The American Senate wants to do something as well to push the Saudis out of Yemen to stop the war. So I think, yes, the Saudis are going to realize that this is a losing. They've lost. They've done very badly. They're incompetent at warfare, and they're not very competent at diplomacy from what we've seen. There needs to be more able leadership running the Saudi foreign policy show. And they have able people in Saudi Arabia. They're just not running the show right now. So I would anticipate a change in Saudi policy, like the Emiratis have already done. The Emiratis realized that they had made a mess of it, and they got out, and they turned it over to local people, and they got some mercenaries, and they've provided some money, but they're not fighting directly anymore.
And Rami, I mean, given the humanitarian situation, I suppose everyone is just hoping that the coronavirus pandemic doesn't make it across the Yemeni border at this stage as well.
Well, that's a pretty foolhardy hope if it is. The virus is going to keep traveling around the world. The poor conditions, health conditions, the destruction of the health system, the infrastructure, the water infrastructure, other things in Yemen, as has happened in Syria and other places around the Middle East, make it certain that these pulverized countries are going to suffer much more severely from the virus because there is not a functioning, strong government that covers the whole territory that can take the necessary measures. And even if you tell people to stay at home, they can't. These people have to go out and work the fields and farm and sell stuff in the market. There isn't a capacity to do the kind of responses that you're seeing in other Arab countries, Middle Eastern countries around the world. So this is bad news in the short run until there is a real concerted effort to stop the war, re-establish a credible, legitimate government system, and then provide the necessary support that can help the country get out of its catastrophic condition.
Indeed, and it's something we'll continue to watch closely. Rami Khouri there from the American University of Beirut. Always good to have you on Al Jazeera, Rami.
Thank you.